Hello and welcome to Life Size Media and our very first Hug in the Snug. I'm joined today by Hermione Taylor, who is the founder of the Do Nation, which is a unique sponsorship platform that replaces cash with environmental actions. Is that a fair description?
Bang on.
Okay, brilliant.
Who'd have thought you were media guy?
Who knew? So to kick us off, can we have a hug?
Kicking off with a hug. Okay.
Great. Okay. So what we're going to talk about today is the Do Nation is very much about the carrot side, as in carrot and stick side of encouraging and inspiring behaviour change. So my question today is encouraging and inspiring people ever going to be enough to tackle the monumental issue of climate change? No.
Is my short answer. Yeah, I think it's not enough on its own. It clearly will never tackle the entire issue of climate change on its own, but it will play an important part.
Okay. So when you set up this initiative, why did you choose... I presume climate change is something you feel passionately about, and you're obviously doing something that's trying to make a difference. So what was it that kind of led you down the route of inspiring people?
I mean, I realise it is a hugely important part of tackling climate change and creating a more sustainable future. Clearly, a huge part of that depends on people living more sustainably and change of lifestyles. I guess when I learned more about some simple ways that you can live sustainably, and I was actually, when I was living in Vancouver for a year, and a lot of my friends there were really into the eco-sustainable thing, and it was not something I'd really been engaged in before. And I realised actually there's loads of solutions out there, there's loads of things that we can do in our own lives that's really easy and actually almost makes our lives better and more fulfilling and happier, whilst also being better for the planet. Why aren't more people doing it? Why aren't more people cycling or eating more healthily? Or, there are lots of things that are good all around, and it frustrated me that there was no really effective way to get those messages across to the wider public and to kind of communicate these ideas of just simple ways we can do stuff to friends and to family without preaching to them.
So if we turn the question around based on preaching to people doesn't work, well, I suppose that's my question. Does preaching to people not work? Is there a place for a little bit of a fear factor of making people kind of really wake up to how severe the issues are? And in your view, how much does sort of legislation and telling people how they have to change have a role to play in that shift?
I think it does have a huge role, and in certain situations there are some elements of sustainable development that legislation is perfect for. There are some elements that we just don't want the government interfering in our own personal lives, in kind of how high we turn our heating up in our houses. We don't want Big Brother government giving us a fine if we have our heating on 1 degree too much, or if we leave our window open for a few minutes too long. Like that's wrong. That's not going to work. But now I've forgotten.
Sorry, just to pick you up on that. You say it won't work, but is there a kind of a place to say that if the government says actually you have to set your washing machine to 30 degrees, or you can't actually manufacture washing machines that go above 30 degrees?
That's where the legislation is really powerful in terms of manufacturing things. You can't sell old light bulbs anymore. You can only sell energy efficient ones. New houses have to be of a certain standard. That's exactly where legislation is really, really powerful. But and I think it's really important. Legislation is the way to create real step changes really fast and to create the urgent shift that we need in many areas. But there are still many things that are actually just down to behaviour that it's harder for legislation to step in on.
And but we do have legislation for behaviour. We're not allowed to smoke in public places. We're not allowed to throw litter around. Yeah. We're not. There are certain things that are harmful to other people and to
I guess it's
our environment.
I guess it's when there's a clear and tangible harm to people directly around you. Mm-hmm. It's a bit more justifiable, and the legislation can come in with the seatbelts, say. That's a really good example of how legislation has come in, it's forced people to do something differently, and then actually attitudes are followed, and people now, it's wrong, you're being irresponsible if you don't wear your seatbelt. But I think a huge part of that's down to the fact that all of those amazing campaigns about if you're not wearing your seatbelt, you're actually probably going to kill the person in front of you. It's not, if it was only ever endangering you, you'd be like, well, it's my decision. So eating less meat. If you eat more meat, you're not going to, well, you are inadvertently through climate change and sustainability and affect people all around the world, but it's a lot less tangible and it's a lot more, watered down. Whereas the main impact is on your own health. So if the government was to say, Alyssa, you're only allowed to have 2 portions of meat a week, I think we'd be in a pretty interesting place.
I'd be buying some vegetarian, so I'd be right on that one. But no, I understand what you're saying. So let's take it back to the more positive side of things.
Oh, yeah.
Does it work? Does your model of, we won't go too much into the detail, but of inspiring people to make better choices, do better things in their lives, try something different that has a good impact, does that work?
So far, yes. I mean, I've seen some amazing case studies, and hopefully we'll be getting more in. It just gives people that nudge to actually try doing these things, which is what is so often lacking. As I said, it was actually just once I tried cycling around more instead of getting the bus, I was like, oh, this is actually way better. Why haven't I done this before? And being asked by a friend to sponsor you gives you that nudge to be like, right, my mate's, Mark's to go hiking to the South Pole at the moment. I've got to do something to support him. So we have seen some great examples of it working. Obviously, it's on a really small scale at the moment, and to have any impact on the larger issue of climate change, it's got to scale up dramatically. But it's part of a much bigger picture of a lot of initiatives and a big movement to actually address people's, to try and make sustainability aspirational and to make it something that people aspire to do rather than feel like they have to do because government's telling them that it must be green. So I think that's where the difference between the carrot and the stick comes. And this was the main point I wanted to raise earlier, and I sidetracked. That legislation's great for dealing with single issues, but actually sustainability is such a complex issue, and it's not about how do you get to work. It's not just about what do you eat. It's about your whole kind of value set and your whole take on just living sustainably. It's a much broader lifestyle thing. And legislation tends to isolate issue by issue and work really well on those. But if we actually want to tackle the bigger picture and create a more sustainable future, then we've got to start to shift people's value sets away from being...
So is it also about ownership, about people doing something because they feel that it's the right thing to do, or that they get something from it for themselves, that they're actually more likely to follow through and make that a way of life than if they're just being told to do something?
I think so. If they really if they see their own benefits to them, or if it's something that they really align to their own values and self-identity, then they're more likely to keep at it. There's been some really interesting work. I don't know if you've read about Common Cause. I've been reading the Common Cause handbook recently, and I learned how to It's a really interesting piece of research into kind of framing values and how everyone experiences all types of values, but you can really reinforce certain ones, and there are certain ones that lead to caring more about sustainability and human rights and all of these kind of good issues, rather than the more extrinsic issues of power and fashion and stuff. I mean, I'm not going to go into it too much, so I'm going to forget the details and start saying really controversial things.
So just to wrap up, this we've talked about this kind of shift in people's values and in their behaviour and sort of motivating to try new things and this ultimate goal of sort of moving towards a sustainable future. What is your kind of greatest hope for that future? Where, if you could look ahead in sort of 50 years' time, what would the sort of fundamental changes be, based particularly around this kind of area of inspiring people? Where would you like to see that going?
Wow.
just
trying to paint an amazing utopian picture in my mind. I think a lot of it would be around values, actually. Now, on that point, people would really enjoy and aspire to being sustainable, not necessarily because it's sustainable, but because they realise it's a fun way of living, and people really value the good things in life more than the superficial extrinsic things in life. Marketing is used for the wider good rather than more consumer focused good. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Hermione,
right.
for being our very first Hug in the Snug. Hopefully this is going to be the beginning of a whole series of conversations with experts in the field like Hermione. So we hope you can join us for future sessions.